So, I thought I'd make this video real quick on how a lot of my project goes together and how it works. So, first of all, this is going to be basically unedited, a lot of rambling, so we'll see how that goes. Alright, so first off, we have our camera here, and the camera has all of the weapons on it. And when I need to activate them, basically when you switch to weapons, you pretty much just is being unactivated and activated and all that. So if I press play here, you can see that in action. So if I pop out my scene view, go over here, you can see that my weapon is right here, and then it just simply hides it and re-adds it. I'm not really going to go into the code of how a lot of this works because that would get to be like a very long video, so I'm just going to try to shorten things up a little bit. Basically, I'm just moving the arms for ADSing, so no real animations. And a lot of the way my stuff works here is just camera shake, just to add that extra feel of recoil. So I'm using this great add-on called Milkshake, which you can find on the asset store, and basically it just does pretty much everything camera shake wise. So if I go up here, you got like shake presets and all that stuff, and then you simply add a script onto your objects that you want to be able to be shaken. So we have shaker, and that's pretty much how I run it through code. Um, New area here just so I can test a few things out. So there's weapon pickups, which are really simple, pretty much just tags and layers. So pretty much first I'm casting a ray, and the ray will cast and hit a surface, and once it hits a surface, it'll then cast a overlay sphere, um, and anything within that area, pretty much the first thing it finds, it'll just grab that. Um, so it could lead to some problems with picking up the wrong weapon, but that's not usually too big of an issue. This is really messy project folder, so I'm not going to go through that at all. Um, let's see here. So that's how that works. And the way I have the guns actually working is simply via a particle system. So every single one of these is a particle system that controls the bullets. I can't expand this for whatever reason. So pretty much I'm using play burst, and pretty much it'll just play this burst. So this means that I can set it up for things like shotguns as well. So I can just change the count here and turn the AR into a shotgun, which is not what I want to do. So I'm just going to keep that count at 1. You can also have it so it's burst, so you can run cycles here. So if I wanted to burst AR, I could run 5 cycles instead of just 1. And then, ooh, that's not what I wanted to do. And you can change the interval to change how quick that burst happens. And then you obviously have all your fun stuff here that you can change as well. Like if I didn't want a cone for whatever reason, I could change it to a sphere, which would be really weird because you'd have bullets shooting behind you. But yeah, so pretty much I have everything here: start speed, start size, really easy stuff. I say particle collisions are by far the best way to do it for single player games. Obviously, if you're doing multiplayer, that's not the case. Um, then you have things like collision here. So dampening, you want to set that to 1 in order to make sure that things are colliding correctly. Pretty much, if a particle collides with a surface, it'll collide and then bounce, like in like 1 frame. If you set that to dampen, it'll just hit. It'll just stay there. So that means you can add things like particle effects with sub-emitters. So I have sparks and smoke as sub-emitters. Right now I just hide those effects when I hit an enemy by just having the enemy hit particle effects be larger. So that's pretty much how I hide that. And then bounce, you can technically set this to 0 because it doesn't need to be bouncing, but I set it to 1 just in case you like, I don't know. You could add ricochets technically with this, so you could technically do that. Collider force, basically if it hits a rigid body, it'll apply a certain amount of force in a correct direction. So that's pretty much how that works. Collisions are actually pretty accurate too. Normally you see like skipping over with things like particles, like let's say this is a pretty thin wall. It normally would just skip over this, right? But no matter how high I set this, it will collide because I'm pretty sure it does a raycast check when it moves. So that means it'll never phase through an object. Um, Once again, can't really use that for multiplayer because it would be pretty much impossible to sync up the particle effects. Um, so I'm not sure if there's a way around that or not. Um, yeah, and then so the way this is really bad design. I'm gonna switch this to scriptable objects because scriptable objects would make this way cleaner. But pretty much all the ADS positions are here. Like this is all handled by linear interpolation, so lerping. And then you have, all your sound effects. Right now, all the sound effects are the exact same for all the guns. I'm going to switch that eventually with once I switch out to a scriptable object system, which would make this way better. Everything else here is pretty much just settings and all that. All right. Um, and then you have okay, yeah. So all these are pretty much just things that aren't too important. Pretty much just what I'm using for what gun I'm on and all that. Um, and then AI. I think AI is a big one here. So what I have set up here. So you obviously have the nav mesh set up in order to make AI work. So any area that's not in blue is not walkable, but this is all Unity stuff. And all these green circles are what I call cover points. So pretty much the AI will check cover points near itself to see if they're valid or not. And pretty much what it's looking for immediately when it sees the player is it's looking for cover points like these. So basically cover where you actually have part of your like body being blocked off by the cover. So it's looking primarily for this kind of cover. And when the AI is low, right now it looks for cover like this, where where your full body would be blocked if you're not in sight of the player. So pretty much, AI as soon as it sees you wants to walk towards this cover. And once it is at a certain HP, it's going to try to walk to one of these covers, which it shouldn't do because what I'm planning on adding is a way to have the AI crouch um, when they're standing behind this kind of cover when they're low, because that would mean they don't do a pointless walk all the way over here or whatever to get to cover, which would not really be great. Um, it works okay right now. AI is still difficult enough, but I would like to change that. And another thing I need to change is to make it so that it's not scanning all of these cover points at once, because that's what the AI is actually doing right now. Is it's scanning all of these, like literally every single one, and that's, as you can imagine, that gets inefficient if there's enough AI. I haven't seen it be a significant problem though, so I'm just going to leave it in for now. I could probably, do some optimizations here and just reduce the amount of cover points, simply because there's so many across the map. AI will also like claim cover spots, so pretty much when they're under attack or they see the player, they'll be like, oh yeah, I'll claim this spot back here, and they'll claim it. And basically, when AI is searching through spots to check, it will completely disregard that spot. It won't even try to go over there. Um, yeah. So that's pretty much how the AI works. And then the AI will pretty much just turn and look at you when you shoot it, when it's like sight vision is above a certain point. I guess I should explain that a little bit. I'll open up the AI sight script. I'm gonna just do this real quick. This is not my greatest code I've ever written before. So pretty much, it's getting the dot product of where the player is to see if it can see it at all. It's taking the positions of like the target. So the target is actually the player's head. So if the player cannot see the AI, then the AI cannot see the player. Um, and then you have the offsets and all that, so that way, because just taking the transform position of the AI was not really enough. Um, so then I give it an offset, so that way the AI's eyes are actually at head level. I might have to rework this when I do eventually add crouching to AI. And then, so basically, yeah, once the dot product is over 0 pretty much, which basically means it can see it in like a 180-degree uh, semisphere. So they'll just see that. Um, and then it'll basically run this function here, this method, C player, and then it pretty much just tries to raycast from the eyes to the player. And if it can't do that, then it obviously doesn't see the player. Um, so that's pretty self-explanatory. So pretty much get the dot product of the AI compared to the player, and basically if it's above a certain amount, then I do a raycast, and if that raycast hits, then I add to the variable of awareness, basically like a detection meter of sorts, if you've played stealth games before. Um, so basically they won't see you immediately unless you walk in front of their face. If you walk in front of their face, they're going to see you immediately. Um, yeah, that's pretty much a lot of the way this works. In case you're curious, baked lighting, of course, that's how I got these little blue hue things here. This is all new. I don't think you've seen this yet. Um, so max light map size 128, pretty much just to keep things really like low. Like this whole scene renders out in about like 1 minute. If I do it, I'm not gonna do it because that would just waste time. Then I have a navigation mesh, and then to keep things somewhat optimized, I also have occlusion culling baked in. Um, so basic stuff, real basic stuff. Um, yeah. So player movement is all rigid body based. Rigid bodies tend to be the best way to go with player movement, I'd say, especially when it comes to things like the dead bodies on the ground and stuff. You want to be able to interact with those without having weird glitchy stuff happen. I've got 10 footstep walk things here, all for grass. I'll probably change it eventually to depend on the material that you're walking on. Not quite sure how I'm going to do that yet for walking materials, but I think I'll figure something out. Player health basically just regens at a constant rate. I don't even have anything that detects if you haven't taken damage for a while. The prefab for like Gore and stuff. So here we have just a quad. It's pretty simple. So this is pretty much just the blood spawn in. It's just a quad. It's not a sprite because sprites don't take shadows from stuff. So quads work much better in that regard. And planes, having just a straight up plane, like there's a difference between planes and quads. Planes actually have like a lot more vertices than a quad does, so quads are what you want to go with. Quads literally have the fewest amount of vertices possible for like a planar shape. Each of the AI have their own like things for sounds, because otherwise you get weird clipping and whatnot with the hit sounds. Music is its just own thing. I haven't even really touched it too much since then. This is a horrible hierarchy. I really need to organize some more, but that's fine. This is just a sample scene that I'm still working in. Um, Pretty much emissive materials will just be emissive as usual. There's not too much else here actually. Trying to think of oh yeah, patrol paths. So pretty much the AI is on a patrol when it starts uh, before it sees a player. So pretty much just gonna bounce between these points in the order that they're like plugged in, pretty much. So I'll head to this one first, then this one, then this one, then this one. So that's how the patrol paths work. And this is all based on like Gizmo stuff, so it's actually really cool. You just have little scripts. Waypoint Gizmo. Let me find that. It's pretty much just you just set up on draw gizmo selected, and it'll just have a little gizmo thing. I hadn't really used gizmos too much before, and gizmos are actually incredibly helpful at figuring out what you want to do with debugging and whatnot, because it made this stuff way easier to figure out. Um, it's pretty much they don't even have to walk on top of these. They pretty much just check the distance. If the distance between the next waypoint is like less than like 2 or something, it'll just switch, just to prevent like just in case these AI like collide with each other or any of that stuff. Um, it'll just be fine. They'll just forget about it. Um, and also if I had like multiple patrol points set and like every single AI was on the same one, then I wouldn't want that having any issues. Um, all these have an animator. This is like terrible. Anyway, this is what the animator looks like. Pretty much it just is able to transfer and transition between any of these things. And I have a few parameters set. Walk right, walk left, walk forward, walk back, and that's all controlled via script. Um, it's kind of hard to tell. I might fix the animations a little bit later, but it's kind of hard to tell which way they're walking just based off their animation. Their animations are not too great. I grabbed them off of Mixamo, but I'm not sure if they're any good or not. Um, pretty much, they have their own like animator for the top part of their body, and then they have they have weapon idle, which is basically just down and like in patrol mode, and then weapon holding when their weapon is up. And then there's this one. Um, yeah, pretty much just walking animations and all that just affect the leg joints. And the way the hitboxes work is you can see them clearly here. There's just capsule colliders and box colliders and a spherical collider. Um, pretty much everything works. Like all these are actual hitboxes, so technically you can thread a bullet between the hitboxes in a few spots. But it's not too big of a deal. I might fix it later if it really becomes problematic. But I honestly haven't had any real issues. The head hitbox collider is more than big enough. Um, yeah. And then the way that everything here works, it has its own script, hitbox detect, and then obviously you have basically the AI will like writhe on the ground until you shoot their head. So that's all controlled with that. Um, yeah. There's not too much else to do with the AI. AI is pretty simple actually. This AI is. It's not all that complicated. I'm gonna add voice lines probably next. A few other things. Oh yeah, light probes, light probes. So when you're doing baked lights, light probes are incredibly useful. So pretty much all of these lines here are light probes. So they're pretty much just boxes, and these boxes have little points, and each of these points it'll interpolate like the lighting on like the surfaces. So let's say I'm in here, I have like a blue hue on my arms, um, and also have a reflection probe in here to handle things like the blue reflections on the gun. But when I step outside, they're no longer blue, and nothing's blue anymore. And oops, and then yeah, all blue again in here. So yeah, that's how that works. And right now I have a very reflective mag on the UMP. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So some basic pro builder stuff here too. Um, but yeah, that's how a lot of this works. If you have any specific questions, you can always comment. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's how the AI works. That's how my player works. It's all based off of particle systems for shooting and whatnot. So that's all pretty simple. Um, oh, one last thing. In order to make like the gore effects and like dismemberment, All you really need to do is you can either scale down like the bones on the AI. So I can set this to 0, 0. Whoops, not that. That's probably not what I want. I don't want to change the spine. So let's say I want to change this leg to be just dismembered. You can pretty much just change it to scale to 0, and then it'll just work. So pretty much what I'm doing right now is I'm scaling to 0 first, and then I'm destroying it. I'm not sure if that actually does anything or not. But you can either scale it to 0 or destroy it, but I found that destroying it is probably better, or not destroying it, but destroying the rigid body components on it, because otherwise I've experienced glitches where it'll pretty much just like spaghettify the ragdoll like if you wait long enough, which is not what I wanted. So pretty much I'm just destroying the rigid body components and it's pretty much just gonna float around. But that's how that works. I learned that from the Ravenfield Discord actually, when people were talking about mutators and all that stuff. Uh, Great game. You should check it out. Yeah. That's pretty much it. Baked lighting, nav system, AI. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So yeah, that's how that works. Alright, see ya.